The 1970s, a decade of pop culture and political fallouts. The decade of one of the biggest scandals in American history. The birth of many companies we know and love today. The decade that shapes the rest of our country forever. Richard Nixon has recently been appointed as the 37th president and has already issued an invasion on Cambodia, spreading the war in Vietnam.
And to guarantee the continued success of our withdrawal and Vietnamization programs, I have concluded that the time has come for action.
This event led to the death of the 4 Kent State students protesting against the war. On April 30th, the invasion of Cambodia took place. U.S. and South Vietnamese troops invaded in the hopes of disrupting the North Vietnamese supply lines. Of this year, United States Senator Gaylord Nelson decided to celebrate the first Earth Day on April 22nd. NASA launched Apollo 13 mission to the moon only for it to explode due to an oxygen tank rupture. The Beatles break up after 8 years of making hit songs. John Lennon had announced a year earlier that he might be leaving, but the breakup did not happen until April 10th of 1970.
In 1971, the voting age has been lowered to 18 years. Disney World is now open, and Apollo 14 has been launched and successfully returned. The Pentagon Papers were published by the New York Times. Cigarette ads have also now ended. Charles Manson has received the death penalty. 1971 marked the start of the digital age, where microprocessors were invented. 60% of American people don't support the war at this point. In 1972, Richard Nixon controlled the Watergate scandal, where Nixon had wiretapped people to listen to the Democratic Party. Digital watches are introduced for the first time by the Hamilton Watch Company. The first scientific handheld calculator was also created by Hewlett-Packard. NASA launches Landsat-1 Earth Resources Technology satellite on July 23rd. NASA's Pioneer 10 had become the first spacecraft to travel through the asteroid belt to Jupiter. The last U.S. ground troops have withdrawn from Vietnam. Equal rights amendments were passed by the U.S. Senate on March 22nd, and biological warfare was banned by world leaders.
Vice President Agnew has resigned due to the possibility of being involved in the Watergate scandal. The Battle of the Sexes tennis match between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs took place, where the winner could possibly take home a $100,000 grand prize. King prevailed as the winner and helped to move the women's movement. The Roe v. Wade Supreme Court case marks an important part in our history, for it marks the day that abortion is made a U.S. constitutional right. The World Trade Center has now become the tallest building in the world.
In 1974, Richard Nixon had resigned as president because of the Watergate scandal. After Nixon resigns, Republican Gerald Ford is elected as president and then pardons Nixon for his wrongdoing. The infamous boxing match between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman took place, where Ali defeated Foreman. In September, the mostly peaceful Kootenai War occurred, in which the Native Americans declared war on the U.S. for lost land. The worldwide inflation problem causes a cost decrease in food, fuel, and manufacturing. The largest series of tornadoes ever hit 13 United States and a province in Canada. The MRI scanner was invented to view internal organs from the body. The speed limit was also set to 55 miles to preserve gas usage. In 1975, when OPEC agrees to raise oil prices by 10%, oil prices around the world increase. The Vietnam War finally ended after 20 years of the U.S. going at war with Vietnam, and the U.S. carries out Operation Baby Lift, bringing Vietnamese orphans into the U.S. To reduce services in hospitals, the first ever strike by doctors took place. Gerald Ford signed a $2.3 billion loan to avoid bankruptcy in New York. The U.S. pulls out of Cambodia after invading the country in 1970. The movie Jaws was released.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
The unemployment rate was at 9.2%, the highest it had ever been in the 70s. In 1976, inflation continued to be a problem around the world. Jimmy Carter had now been elected as president. Steve Jobs had founded the Apple Computer Company. The first space shuttle in the US is called the Enterprise. The Viking 1 lander has landed on Mars. The Son of Sam terrorist attacks had lasted for a year in New York. 3 gunmen abducted a school bus that contained 26 children.
The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, has died. The New York City blackout has lasted for about 25 hours, and Atari has been released in North America. Commodore PET, or Personal Electronic Translator Computer, has been released, and Star Wars has premiered on May 25th. 165 people have died in the Supper Club fire in Beverly Hills. Martin Luther King Jr. has been awarded the Medal of Freedom.
In 1978, Egypt and Israel signed the Camp David Accords in an effort to secure peace between the two nations. NASA has unveiled the first group of women astronauts during January. Double Eagle 2 had been the first balloon to travel transatlantic. The first Garfield comic had been released in the U.S. newspapers. Torrijos Carter Treaty had been signed, and the Panama Canal had been handed back to Panama. The U.S. teachers strike to give longer summer vacations to students. The worldwide unemployment rates have risen. The U.S. dollar is sinking to the record low value. The U.S. bans the sale of the latest computer to the USSR. In 1979, the last year of the 70s had begun. The 3 Mile Island nuclear accident happened, where a nuclear generator melted down and forces pregnant women and children to leave the island. Michael Jackson's breakthrough album, Off the Wall, drops. The sports channel ESPN begins airing. The SALT II treaty is signed by the US and Soviets to ban missiles and reduce the number of delivery vehicles. Voyager 1 shows a picture of one of Jupiter's rings. Oil prices increase, which causes panic buying, making prices worse. Death to the Klan March, which was organized by communist supporters, killed 5 people in an open fire. 11 fans were killed at the Who concert after a human stampede crushed them. The American Airlines Flight 191 crashes at O'Hare Airport in Chicago.
Although the 1970s were filled with tragedies and chaotic times, it still helped to shape our history for that of future decades.